What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Make sure that you're following Anthony on X. I'm doing this early today at AntSanPhilly. You can follow me on X at Bob_Wankel. Make sure that you're checking out the newsletter that comes out on Mondays and Fridays. Red October Philly. You can go to redoctoberphilly.com and check that out as well. I want to get those advertisements in early. And listen, Anthony, we talked about it on Saturday when we last recorded. Sweeping a series, no matter the opponent on the road in the division, is generally a pretty difficult proposition. And we certainly highlighted just how bad this Marlins team is, and they are bad. There's no question about it. But the Phillies failed to sweep them with their best guy or one of their best guys on the mound and an early 3-0 lead. And I look at the weekend and I say, all right, great, another series win on the road. That's what you kind of have to do. And if you continue to do that over the next 4.5 months, you're in pretty good shape. But also, come on, man.
Yeah.
You lose that team. Seriously? Like, Zack Wheeler's allowed to have a bad start. That's going to happen. But I wouldn't expect Zack Wheeler to give up 6 runs to that team across the entirety of his season, let alone over 4 innings.
Well, he had only given up, one earned run in the previous 4 starts or something like that? Like,
one earned run in 25 1/3 innings pitch. Like,
yeah.
You know, you including the post-game show, which I didn't honestly tell you I didn't dial into too much of, but I could sense some frustration there. Obviously, people on social media were a little bit annoyed, I guess, about the way the game played out, and rightfully so. I mean, listen, again, it's just all about the context. I think you step back, take a deep breath, and look at what happened over the weekend and say, okay, fine. And it's good pitchers have bad games sometimes. Fine, that's going to happen too, but man, that was one yesterday where you're like, oh, come on. And then you fast forward and you're watching Sunday Night Baseball and you're like, oh, here come the Braves. Like, the Phillies are going to have a 4-2 week, but they're going to lose 2 games to the Braves in the standings Sunday to Sunday. But there you go. Braves have a horrible loss too. So I guess it's a wash. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it is, right? It's ultimately in the race, it's a wash. But at the same time, like, you're watching that game, Castellanos hits the home run early and they go up 3-0. And you're like, all right, they're going to put this team away. They're going to bury them. And
I
then
would have bet a mortgage payment that the Phillies won the game at that point.
It was like, that's it. I mean, you got Wheeler pitching. You staked into a 3-0 lead. You're facing this awful Miami lineup, and then all of a sudden it just starts to just slowly and you're watching the game and you're going, yeah, this is going to end badly, isn't it? This is going to end badly. And even after they tied it back up, when they didn't go ahead in that inning, they tied it. You're like, I think that was their one push, and that was it. And like, you're still worried the whole time. And they really got to I'm sitting here, Maria's watching the game with me yesterday, and we're watching at the top of the 10th, and they load the bases. And I said to her, they either score, if they don't score here, they're losing this game in the bottom of the 10th. It's just going to happen. Like, it's going to be something stupid too. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. So look, yes, to me, you put the loss yesterday, 90% of it on the fact that Zack Wheeler had a bad game. Okay. That's pretty much cut and dry what happens. But there are spots in that game where the offense could have scratched out one more run and just didn't. And there's just a bunch of crazy, stupid things that happen. And you lose a game that you absolutely should win, although they didn't deserve it yesterday.
The way that I always look at it, if you're going to invest 2.5, 3.5 hours in a baseball game, you reserve the right to be angry if you don't get the result that you want out of it.
Yeah.
So this is an inclusive show. I'm not going to sit here and do the high and mighty, like, who cares? One game on May 12th. It's the Marlins. You won the series already. You don't have a right to be annoyed about what you watch. It's fine to be annoyed about what you watch. And if this were like a playoff game, I would tell you that it would be incredibly annoying to stake Zack Wheeler a 3-0 lead. He gives up a 3 spot, and that's bad enough. Like, right there, that should be all of it. Then he comes back the next inning and gives up another 3 runs. It's like, come on, what the hell is that? Now, I know that he wasn't helped by Edmundo Sosa. I know that there was a ball out over Nick Castellanos' head where you say if you have a little bit more of a rangy right fielder, maybe does he make a play? Like, I don't know, man. But to me, it's like, once you get that initial thrust from Miami, like, that's got to be the end of it. Like, for him to go back out there and give up another few, like, not great. And there were a couple different situations to capitalize later in the game. They didn't do it. Brandon Marsh came up with the bases loaded, doesn't get a job done. We'll talk a little bit more about that situation in depth later on. And then in extra innings, like Alec Boehm, we talk about the approach, right? And he's a good 2-strike hitter and he uses all fields. You got to put the ball in play there. Like, win a ball game right there. Put the ball in play, win a ball game. And he doesn't, and they don't. So I mean, they did. They definitely wasted and flushed a lot of opportunities throughout the course of that game, and it's definitely one of the more annoying losses that they've had. And I think you can just balance that out, knowing, okay, all good, it's okay. Like it should be fine. We'll see. Now, if they lose the division by a game, you can come back and look.
Come back to this one.
So,
although they didn't lose ground in this game, but that's all right.
So I think what I'm telling you this morning is like, be annoyed, but don't be an idiot. Don't get carried away here.
Yeah,
that's I think my message to everybody out there.
And that's fine. But there are people out there that will. I saw some people on social media that were melting down yesterday.
Like they were minus 220 favorite yesterday. They have a 3-0 lead in the first inning. Like, you got to win that game. You should win that game all the time. I get it. I totally understand.
Yeah, for sure.
So no real concern for me about the game. Concern I do have a little bit here, more big picture. You have an older team.
Yeah.
We keep talking about they're a bunch of veterans and they want it and they're killers and I trust these guys and that's cool. But the human body is the human body. And I just want to maybe give you a little negativity here on a Monday because it's been a while. Trey Turner, he's out for another probably 5 weeks or so. Kyle Schwarber over the weekend. My back hurts. You don't see him for a couple days against a pair of left-handed starters. Okay. JT Realmuto presumably would have been in the lineup yesterday. Says, my knee hurts a little bit. He's out of the lineup. The other night, Friday night, you saw Bryce Harper take one of his hellacious hacks. Kind of like had this like little weird reaction to it. He was back in the lineup though, played the rest of the weekend, DH'd yesterday. Like just kind of file that away. I'm just kind of wondering here. And we see now at Boehm, who, he's only 27 years old, but he's even had a little tightness and a little bit of an awkward reaction, some recent swings over the past week or so. Well, is this something to be kind of concerned about? Because like, we obviously know it's a good team. We know that they can compete for a division. We know that they are, barring catastrophe, a lock to make the postseason. To me, this is the thing that could derail this team. It's like, do these little tweaks and these little minor annoyances, do they start to accumulate and mean something a little bit more? Because what we saw the final 2 games of that series was a C- lineup at best.
Yeah, no, for sure. And of course, I mean, that's the one thing that you got to always kind of, that nobody talks about is that, as good as this team's played and as exciting as it's going to be to have this season ahead of you, there is that notion that, hey, maybe they don't, some injuries that they wouldn't have had in years past, they might get now. And we're not talking about major injuries, but these little naggers, are injuries that could, bother a guy for a while, bother a team for a while. And yeah, they could, I don't say derail the year, but they could make it be a little bit less, less than what it's been so far. And yeah, you got to be careful. You certainly got to be careful, with this. And it's funny because you hear Rob Thompson say it all the time. It's kind of become like his catchphrase, over the last 2 seasons, really, about, hey, we got to just make sure our guys stay healthy. Just make sure our guys stay healthy. And the reality of it is because although their depth is a little bit better this year, it's not deep. Like you can only go like so many guys before you're like really scraping into the minor leagues and calling up players that really shouldn't be at this level for a championship contending team. And so, yeah, Bob, there is that concern. And, I don't think, Harper won't tell anybody that he's feeling something, but when he made that swing and you saw him, I know Thompson said he slipped in the box. I call BS on that. Like, I don't think that's what it was at all. I think that was a really hard swing and miss, and he felt something. And because the rest of the game, there was not one hard swing the rest of the way. Yeah. Every swing thereafter was kind of half-assed.
The ball. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And he had some, to his credit, he had some hard swings yesterday. He did swing the bat like he normally does yesterday. So, all right.
Yeah, like it's not a situation where you expect to see him on the IL this week, but it's right. Like, hey, are we getting the best of this guy, or is he holding something back, or Does he have to grab at it from time to time? And what does that mean? I think
Yes.
it's really the question.
Correct. And then, of course, Schwarber, he's a guy that does not like to come out of the lineup. And so, all right, you give him 1 day, okay, fine. 2 days, now you're like, and let's see what happens tonight, because Thompson did say afterwards that he wasn't sure that either Schwarber or Real Muto would be okay to go tonight.
Yeah.
So he says, but they're both day to day right now, is what he said after the game. And so it's like, well, okay, like, so you're right. Like, what does this mean? What does this amount to? I don't think any of them are going to be IL stints. I think they're all day-to-day kind of things. But are they going to crop up more frequently because these guys are on the wrong side of 30? Yeah,
Right.
probably. You're probably going to have a better chance of that.
And this is the battle, because you tune in and watch a game, you sit down and you see the lineup come out and you go, oh, okay, like this isn't their best lineup. I hope they can kind of survive it. And you want to see them put their best foot forward. You want to see them on a daily basis take their best shot. But right now, going into this series with the Mets, I'm kind of like, if you need another day for Kyle Schwarber, if you're not sure, give him another day. If JT Realmuto needs another 2 days, then give him another 2 days. Like, I would much rather see them punt a game against the Mets tonight than potentially have these guys miss 2, 3, 4 weeks, because it becomes something more. Now, we don't know the ins and outs of each of these injuries. It could just be a little tightness. It could just be a little bit of swelling, and that's all there is to it. And there's really no reason to be overly worried or overly concerned about it. But if these things do become a little bit more consequential, then there's a ton of reason to be concerned about it, especially with JT Realmuto, especially as much as they use him. Like, I would just go back to yesterday's game. And, like, in all fairness to Garrett Stubbs, who we love, he's been on the show. I'm a fan of his. I think that from an intangible standpoint, he does a lot for that clubhouse. And I actually think that he's better than what he has shown here offensively this season and even last season. I think that he feels that he's a little bit better than that. I think the Phillies think he's a little bit better than what he's given. And I know that he plays inconsistently or infrequently, but like, there should be a little bit more than that. And I would look at yesterday's game and say, like, hey, listen, JT Realmuto has really swung the bat well lately, hitting out of the 2-hole. He's really giving you something. And you got a guy in Braxton Garrett out there, another left-hander. Like, would I have loved to have seen JT Realmuto in the lineup yesterday? Damn right I would have. And when you look at Garrett Stubbs, 0 for 4, 2 strikeouts. He's hitting 115 with a 348 OPS right now. You lose a game 7-6 in extra innings to the Marlins. Is JT Realmuto the difference yesterday? Might have been.
Maybe.
You're probably one swing away from winning that game yesterday. And you, in fairness to everybody involved, not trying to be a dick, but JT Realmuto gives you a better opportunity to win that game yesterday. There's no doubt about it. So, look, though, if you're going to have to lose a game or two at the expense of that, then so be it. And I don't know if you wanted to touch on it. We talked very briefly before the show. Like, we're talking about Garrett Stubbs' offense right now. There's this thing that has come out here. Look at Zack Wheeler's numbers with JT over time, and look at how he struggled with Garrett Stubbs. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, I don't know why it came up on the broadcast, and it was Ben Davis who brought it up, and then I guess they tried to. I didn't really watch the post game, but apparently, like they brought it up on the post game as well, and they kind of dragged it through the mud a little bit, which is unnecessary. And then there were some questions in the locker room afterwards, so people are obviously paying attention to this, and it really it's a head scratcher. But apparently, if you look at Wheeler's numbers with when JT Realmuto catches him versus when Garrett Stubbs catches him, they are polar opposites. But the reality of it is that, JT Realmuto has caught nearly 600 innings of Zack Wheeler, and Garrett Stubbs has caught 34 innings of Zack Wheeler. Like, I mean, like, you can't.
I have it right here, and we'll just get it out there. Zack Wheeler, 94 career starts with JT Realmuto catching, 2.91 ERA. A 5.03 strikeout to walk ratio. Zack Wheeler in 7 career starts with Garrett Stubbs catching, 6.29 ERA, a 2.23 strikeout to walk ratio. So those numbers are pretty staggering. And I get why, especially when you cover a team 162 games a year, and you see that type of trend jump out at you, I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the question. It might be a little bit unfair to make it the focal point of the post-game analysis, though.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, and there were a couple times yesterday. I mean, it's to be fair. I mean, there were a couple times when Wheeler and Stubbs weren't necessarily on the same page. Wheeler was shaking them off a little bit, right? They had to have that one mound visit and Stubbs did it to avoid a pitch clock violation, but at the same time, they couldn't get on the same page on the pitch that he wanted to call there. So, I mean, yeah, but I mean, I think that's more of I don't want to say lack of familiarity. They obviously know each other well, but I mean, when you're catching a guy and he has a certain way of wanting to call the game or wanting to throw the game, and you have maybe a slightly different thought on it. I'm sure this goes more by what Wheeler wants to throw than what Stubbs wants to throw. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, I'm sure that Stubbs is calling pitches, but Zach's not going to throw something he doesn't want to throw. He's not going to throw something just because Stubby calls it. I mean, you hear pitchers talk all the time. I'm just throwing whatever JT calls. But I don't think Zack Wheeler's that type of pitcher. I think Zack Wheeler determines what Zack Wheeler's pitching and what Zack Wheeler's throwing. So whether to me, it doesn't matter who the catcher is. Now, yes, could there be better communication, better get on the same page, maybe a better rhythm? All that kind of plays in, of course. But this is when I would argue that any backup catcher on any team is probably having the same kind of, hiccups with their ace that they're not normally catching that the starting catcher wouldn't have, right? I mean, I would say that that's pretty normal in baseball. And this is not a unique situation.
Yeah. Well, I suspect we may see Garrett Stubbs again tonight. I would be surprised, honestly, if JT Realmuto is in the lineup. I think the Phillies will try to give him a little bit of a breather here.
Yeah.
I know it's not ideal. You're going to see another lefty, Manaea, on the mound tonight for the Mets. So not great, but
let's put it this way. I mean, anybody who wants to criticize, Garrett Stubbs, the last game he caught prior to yesterday was Christopher Sanchez's last start.
Mm-hmm.
Sanchez went 7 strong innings.
So hey, maybe those two guys are on the same page. If
Stubbs must have done a good job calling that game, right? I mean, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is a theme that we've kind of hit on the past couple of weeks, though. When you have a good team and everything is going well, or most things are going well, you look for the things that aren't. And like right now, Garrett Stubbs is 3 for 26 this season. He has 3 singles. Like, he's hitting 115. His slugging percentage is 115. You'd like to see a little bit more. And listen, backup catcher, defense first, great. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you, Bob. I mean, look, I don't think any team in baseball really values backup catchers to be more than a defensive. I mean, on field, obviously, we talk about the intangibles with Stubbs. It's a whole different animal. But the on field production, they just want a guy who's a really good receiver. They want a really good defensive catcher. I mean, absolutely. That's really what teams look for. They're not.
It's like the Johan Rojas anecdote. Yeah. Well, if you're relying on Johan Rojas for offensive thump out of the 9 spot, then you're probably in trouble. Well, if you're relying on your backup catcher to be a productive hitter for you, then you're probably in trouble. But
yeah, it would be better if it was. You're not wrong. It would be better if it was better than 115 and whatever 300
like a $1.95. Be Matt Olson.
You're right. You're not wrong with that. I agree with you.
A little dig at the Braves.
That's good.
Okay. The other thing that's sort of interesting is that when you evaluate this roster, you feel pretty good about their depth. Like, on a one-off, like having Christian Pache in a game, okay, I feel all right about that. Going to Edmundo Sosa if I have to, I feel okay about that. With Merrifield, obviously getting extended opportunity here now, but in a bench situation, you feel all right about that. Like, I would say that the Phillies have pretty good positional depth. That, however, has not translated to situational pinch hitting this season.
Yeah.
They are without a hit. On May 13th, from a pinch hitter, I believe that they are 0 for 14 right now with pinch hitters this season. What do you make of that? Because, the thing that you would think is, well, they just simply must have a dismal bench. I'm not saying this is the greatest bench ever assembled, but it's a functional bench. Certainly it should be better than that. So is it just pulling the lever at the wrong time, pulling the wrong lever? Just one of those things. It's 14 at bats. I'm sure that they'll go 5 for the next 6 and it'll all even out. Like, what do you make of that? Because
I don't really look at the bench, Bob, because really the pinch hitters that are coming into games are usually not your bench guys. I mean, other than Cody Clemens having a few opportunities to pinch hit.
He's had a couple of opportunities late in games here lately. And look, I mean, yeah, like, you're relying on Cody Clemens to be your guy. Not great, but like,
yeah. But I mean, if you look at your bench guys, Garrett Stubbs is not pinch hitting, Christian Pache is not pinch hitting, and Mundo Sosa is not pinch hitting, right? So in reality, your pinch hitters are your regular starters who, when they have a day off, are getting an opportunity to pinch hit, and they haven't come through. Yeah. I don't know if it's. I guess the way I would look at it, and again, I wasn't not expecting you to bring this up. We didn't talk about this beforehand. So, but my instant reaction to it is, if you're a guy who's playing every day or almost every day, and now you're on the bench and you're being called on to pinch hit late in a game.
This is the Gotcha podcast. The Gotcha podcast. We don't talk about 90% of the stuff that we're just shooting from the cuff here, man.
That's all right. It's all good. It's all good. But my instant reaction is, if you're not in the lineup and you're normally in the lineup, it's a whole different mindset, right? Like if you're like back in the day when you had guys who were noted pinch hitters, and I'll just use the Phillies names from back in the day. Like, I mean, you had your Greg Grosses, right? And you had your Del Unsers going way back to the early 80s. And then even later, like even guys like, like your Tomas Perez's, right? Who would come in and pinch hit and were decent pinch hitters. Greg Dobbs, if you want to go to the 2008 Phillies, he was the best pinch hitter on that team. Those guys were used to being put into that role because it was a different game back then. You were batting for the pitcher spot. You always had to kind of be ready, whatever. When you put 9 guys into the lineup and you're not in that lineup, odds are you're probably not getting into that game. And so it's a mindset thing. And so if you're normally a starter and now all of a sudden you're being asked to come in and you've been shut down for the entire day, pretty much knowing you're not going to play, and now you're being asked to come in into a high leverage spot and do a job, it's a lot harder to do. Not saying that they don't want to, not saying that the desire to not succeed is there. I mean, it's certainly there. But my reaction to it is that we don't use bench players like we used to use them. They're not there to be pinch hitters anymore. So I think it's a lot tougher spot for a guy to be put into these days than it ever was before.
That's fair. And I want to just go back to what I said. I think I said I was shooting from the cuff. I don't know what that means. I think it's shooting from the hip, right?
Yeah. Well, off the cuff, shooting from the hip.
I think I just took two things and
put them together. That's all good. It's good.
I got to do a better job. It's early, though. It's Monday. Coffee hasn't worked its way through yet. So good analysis, though, even though I put you on the spot.
That's all right. Thanks.
Look, this got lost, but I do want to touch on this with Zack Wheeler a little bit. Are you concerned about Zack Wheeler?
610.
I will say, yesterday, I'm like looking at it. I'm like, man, it just doesn't quite have it. 3 walks. That's pretty uncharacteristic of him. And some balls were hit hard. And velocity was up, though, actually, by about 0.4 miles per hour. So he was averaging 95 yesterday on the 4-seam fastball. Actually, all of his stuff was harder yesterday. He's averaging 94.6 on his fastball this season. So like, there is no world where you walk away from that start yesterday and say, like, that's concerning. Like, no. You are absolutely just bagging that and throwing it in the trash, right?
Yeah, it's interesting to me, Bob. And I mentioned this to you via text yesterday, and he didn't bring it up in conversation. But this is the same team, if you remember, was it last year? I think it was last year. Pretty sure it was last year. I remember being in the scrum talking to him about it. Where the Marlins thought he was tipping pitches, or he thought that maybe he was tipping pitches to the Marlins, and they were jumping on him early in counts yesterday. They were swinging early, the Marlins, a lot of at bats.
Can we get Josh Bell out of the NL East, please? Like, I'm so tired of watching, and he stinks. Like, he's not even a good baseball player, and he is. Oh man,
kills the Phillies. It's unreal. No matter where he's been, he's killed the Phillies. He even had, if you remember, he had that cup of coffee with Cleveland last year, and the Phillies went out to Cleveland and played him, and he hit the Phillies in Cleveland.
Yeah. You might see a division opponent 12 times a year, but you see Josh Bell 36 times a year. But somehow he is able to jump around and always be where the Phillies are.
I know, it's funny.
San Diego, Cleveland, Miami, Washington. It doesn't matter. You're going to find out.
He's there. But yeah, I don't think there's anything to really, be like big red flag. I think Wheeler was frustrated. He was probably throwing harder, Bob, because he was mad. Like,
Yeah.
and he was having an issue with the home plate umpire yesterday. Like, he kept asking questions. They asked him about that too, because after he gives up the home run, he went in and had a little conversation with the home plate umpire about a strike call that wasn't or a ball that was called earlier that should have been called a strike. You had a few of those yesterday too. I think there was just a lot of anger and aggravation with, he didn't have good feel for his pitches, and now you're letting this Mickey Mouse team hit you around the ballpark, and you're getting squeezed a little bit, and you don't have your normal catch. There's a lot of frustrations, I think, for Zack Wheeler yesterday. I'm going to make a prediction. He pitches again. His next start will be against Washington, I believe, on the weekend. I predict Zack Wheeler has a dominant performance at Citizens Bank Park against the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, I could probably go for that. He actually, in 3 regular season starts against the Marlins last season, had a 3.00 ERA, went 6 innings in each start, gave up 3 once, 1 once, and 2 once. So he gave up more runs in 4 innings yesterday, whereas many runs to the Marlins yesterday in 4 innings as he did in 18 last year. So,
yeah.
And then he was very good against them in the playoffs too, obviously. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, there you go. A couple other things I want to get to for sure here. We did have the Stubbs conversation, so let me just cross that off the list. Bryson Stott. Okay, Bryson Stott.
We're going positive now. I thought there was one more negative that you wanted to
do. I guess we could do that. I guess we could probably get to one more thing here on the negative train. I guess we did talk about this briefly before we got together this morning. Brandon Marsh, right?
Yeah.
Brandon Marsh was Mr. April for the Phillies, got off to a great start. We're talking about, you look at all these offensive statistical categories. He's top 5 this, top 3 that. Is this the breakout for Brandon Marsh? And certainly we knew that he was not going to sustain that type of pace, but he has cooled considerably here now over the past couple weeks. There's been a conversation every time a lineup comes out, and all the beat writers get this. Like, if Alex tweets out the lineup, Todd tweets out the lineup,
I do it.
Tweet out the lineup. It's like, where the fuck's Brandon Marsh? You got to let him hit against left-handers. You got to let him hit. Like, he's earned the right. Brandon Marsh is 4 for 30 against left-handed pitching right now with 16 strikeouts this season.
Yeah.
There's 2 different ways to look at this. Like, 30 at bats doesn't make a career, doesn't make a profile of how you handle left-handed pitching, though I would say that he has not been great against left-handers in his first 2 seasons here either. What do you do about this? Like, do you kind of just shut your eyes and let him take bulk at bats against lefties? Or do you think that they kind of are protecting him adequately in terms of not letting him start multiple games, 3 games in a row against a left-handed starter? Because frankly, he just hasn't really done much with them.
No, I think that they're doing it right. I mean, look, and he's the one thing about Marsh is he is an ultimate teammate. Like, he will not complain about this. He roots on, the guys who come in his place, whether it's Pache or Rojas or Merrifield. He's got great.
Yeah, those guys had a moment on Friday night. It's not the first time either, but you could see the genuine excitement that Brandon Marsh has for Johan Rojas, who to some level is taking away Brandon Marsh's opportunities. I think it says a lot about that guy and how he handles it.
Yeah. So ultimately it makes him a great teammate, right? And that's good. And that's a good thing. You want that. That's a great vibe for your locker room. You want that. But if you look at his career now, Bob, against left-handed pitching, he's had 330 plate appearances, and he's 214, 268, 565 OPS. That's terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible. But against righties, 273, 345, 792 OPS. Like, that's pretty good. Yeah. So that's so that they look at it, and Phillies look at it and they're saying, well, yeah, I mean, we'll give him some opportunities here and there against a lefty, maybe not against the tougher lefties, maybe against maybe Braxton Garrett is not, an overpowering lefty. So he was the guy that Marsh got the start against, as opposed to the other 2 guys that the Marlins trotted out over the weekend. But yeah, I think they're handling it right, just because it's a small sample this year of only 30 plate appearances, but over a 3-year, 4-year career, it's more than that. And you're starting to look at it and going, okay, maybe this guy just cannot hit left-handers, and that's okay. I mean, you have players like that. I guess the disappointment is that when you made that trade and you looked at him and said, okay, he's still young and he's going to be a part of this team for a long time to come, that you really didn't want him to be a platoon guy. Although
Right.
he's on the right side of the platoon. If you're going to be a platoon guy, you want to be the guy who can hit right-handers because you're going to play more. But at the same time, maybe that's the slight disappointment. Like he can't figure it out and can't be better against lefties.
Does he have time to figure it out? He's 26 years old. So is it, are you comfortable saying this is probably what he is? Maybe there's a little bit of an uptick, but he's just not going to be a guy that can give you that, let's say, 720 OPS against lefties and then do what he does against righties. And then you feel really good about him being more of an everyday guy. Like, do you think he's going to always just be this split heavy?
You're asking for a lot to get to 720. I mean, considering
I know. I mean, right now, given where he's at, especially this season, but he's more than half of his at-bats and in strikeouts against left-handed pitchers.
He's 565 for his career. So 299 at-bats, 133 times he struck out. 133 times in 299 at-bats.
Right.
That's insane. That's an insane strikeout rate. So, he doesn't see the left-handed pitcher. If this is what he is, this is what he is. You would hope he would get better, but I don't think you're in a season where you can try and find it, try and figure that out. Can he get better?
Yeah.
This is a season where you're all in to win a championship. And if you can't worry about Brandon Marsh figuring out how to hit lefties, you got to find somebody who can play against lefties and play in his place. And, for the most part, these guys have done okay. I mean, I thought Pache had 2 decent games this weekend. Yesterday, not so much at the plate, but the Friday and Saturday night, he had 5 hits combined against 2 left-handed batters. So, I mean, that's okay. Now, I don't think Christian Pache is an exact platoon for Brandon Marsh, but for a couple games, he was good. And it worked. Whit Merrifield should be able to do that, but Merrifield's got to play some infield right now because of Turner being out of the lineup. So you would think that the combination of those guys would make for a good rotation. But yeah, would you like a little bit more from Brandon Marsh? Probably.
Yeah, his last 30 games now, 24 for 101, hitting 238, OPS 688. Not dreadful, but not great. And he's really struggled here his last 7 games. 5 for 27, 8 strikeouts, hitting $185. He's down to now, I believe, 248 for the season, 726 OPS. So he's just kind of going through it right now. I don't think he's that guy either. I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot more to his offensive game than what you've seen here for the last 2-3 weeks or so. So they're kind of dealing with the downturn of him. And, you go back and, again, file this under the it's early conversation. We're talking about wow, Brandon Marsh, is he an all-star this season? And what's sort of wrong with Bryson Stott? Not that we overreacted to Bryson Stott. I think you and I kind of asked the question, he's not hitting. Nobody seems to really be talking about that. Why is this? That was sort of our approach. And maybe we see why now. He's up to 270. He was on base 5 times yesterday. He's 10 for his last 22, 8 walks in his last 7 games, hitting 455. Over his last 15, he's hitting 333 with a 1.085 OPS. I mean, he's been pretty good for them. This is sort of what I expected to see. I still am a little bit perplexed over his usage. And we had this conversation previously. Talk about hiding Brandon Marsh or protecting Brandon Marsh against left-handed pitchers. Bryson Stott doesn't start that first game in Miami. I'm still a little bit surprised that he's not getting 15 starts in a row. Why does a guy like Nick Castellanos or Kyle Schwarber, I get Schwarber, but you see how much Castellanos has struggled, and we'll get to him in a moment, and you just kind of barrel forward. He's in the lineup. Put it in ink. We're not taking him out. Why is Bryson Stott not starting every game for this team?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, Bob, and I find it curious as well. He's not a guy who has struggled against lefties, although he did struggle a little bit earlier this year, but he's kind of turned it around now. I wonder if it was just a matter of, hey, we got to get him into a rhythm here, but he played 2 out of the 3 against left-handers, right? So it was just, they picked one and rested him. So maybe you're going to start to see it a little bit more, and he's just going to miss here and there. You asked me, I think, I don't remember what episode it was, maybe a couple episodes ago, if I thought he was going to get, what was it, 100, what was the line you said, 130 starts?
Yeah, I think I ended up saying 135, I think was the number that I landed on.
Yeah, and I said it was right about that, and I think that's probably what it's going to be. And yeah, maybe that number's probably still a little low for most people, but I think you're still looking at a guy going to get you 600 plate appearances. Like, I mean, it's pretty solid for today's game. I mean, you don't have guys playing every day anymore. For the most part, some guys do, but most don't. And so, like, I'm okay with it. I would be more concerned if it was the same situation that they were using, like that they were doing with Marsh, where he was only getting 1 out of 3. But he's getting 2 out of 3 against lefties. I'm okay with it. I think it's part of the progression. It's only his 3rd year in majors, right? Maybe eventually gets to a point where he's an everyday guy, but they still feel like there's something in his development that's happening, and they still need to give him that odd game off against lefties here and there. I'm okay with it. But the thing that I'm most impressed with is his walk rate all of a sudden. Like, where did this come from? He's never been a guy who's walked, right? I mean, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 11 walks in his last 10 games, I think it is. He's only had 2 games in the last 10 that he has not walked.
Yeah, his walk rate last season was 6.1%. It's 13.8% right now.
Yeah, it's unreal. It's I don't know where it came from, but he suddenly has gotten really, really good at being selective at the plate. And that's a big, that could be a thing to me, Bob. We talked about this last year. That the difference, why Bryson Stott was not a top of the lineup guy in my mind last year, as well as he was hitting, was because he couldn't do this. Like, he would get himself into so many unfavorable counts and have to grind through the at bat just to have a chance to get on base with a hit, because he wouldn't take walks. His career high for walks is 39. He's already at 19.
He's on pace for 75 walks this season.
Yeah, that's
75.
That's my point. Like, he's going to almost double his career best. That is a major change for Bryson Stott. And if this continues, then I look at it and say, this is a top of the order guy. Maybe this eventually is your leadoff hitter.
Isn't it fun to get a guy that comes through your system that you feel pretty good about, and he shows you flashes early on in his career? We'll talk about the it factor and a guy that you trust in big situations, and he can handle the moment. And then in 23, you start to see the statistical progression. He hits 280 for you. OPS settles in the mid 700s. It's a big jump from where he was as a rookie. And now here you are. He's played 36 games this season, and you see he's hitting 270. It's about where he was last year. The on-base percentage has jumped from 329 to 370, though. I mean, like, that's a huge jump year over year. And again, he's in the middle of a good run the last couple of weeks. He's coming off a game in which he was on base 5 times. It's easy to kind of applaud him in this moment, but man, like, if he can just settle right around this neighborhood, you have a damn good Major League Baseball player, and a guy that you feel like, yeah, there could be even a little bit more on top of this. And that is something that they have not had a lot of. I mean, you could point to positionally Rhys Hoskins. I think I without looking at the numbers, I guess you kind of felt like he evolved a little bit. I mean, he came up and was so good right away. Like, I mean, his best was immediate. But, I think that Rhys sort of gave you a reasonable progression and was a really consistent performer, and that was nice, at least offensively. But this guy, like, you just feel like you haven't maybe even seen his best yet. And it's sort of refreshing.
Yeah, it is.
You didn't have to go out and sign him to a 5-year, $100 million deal to get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Or you didn't give him a 7-year contract for him to play to play parts of 3 seasons and then blame his offensive collapse because Gabe Kapler made him play second base and center field. But I digress.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Totally fine.
You remember talking about that? Like, man, how far have we come, Anthony?
We've come a long way.
Gabe Kapler ruined Scott Kinger.
But no, the reality of it is, and this is why, and look, Stott is a success story from a previous regime. He wasn't a Dombrowski regime guy, although he came up under Dombrowski, but at the same time, his development occurred prior to Dombrowski getting here. But the very first thing that Dombrowski did when he got here was he looked at the minor league system and the player development approach that the Phillies had and said, this is a disaster and this has to be fixed. And so what your hope is that when you see something like this happening and you see that progression from a Bryson Stott, and you look at even a guy like Rojas, who was probably not on a lot of people's radar. And now all of a sudden he's your starting center fielder, and he might not be anywhere close where he needs to be at the plate, but you're seeing development there. You makes you be a little bit more excited for the future of this franchise, that maybe they have something in place where the young players that they have, the prospects that they have, position players, they've been okay with some pitchers, but position player wise, that they are now really starting to figure out how to have these guys develop in the minor leagues so that when they hit the majors, they're ready to contribute. And so that's probably something that, you could take some excitement about for the long range forecast of this Philadelphia Phillies franchise.
Do you have anything insightful that you want to add about Nick Castellanos? Or is it sort of the same talking points? Like, well, the numbers aren't great, but he's been a lot better lately, and that's nice. Like, is there anything else to add to that?
8-game hitting streak. He's hitting 320 something with an OPS over 1,000. I forget exactly what it is, but
yeah, well, his last 7 games, he's hitting 333 with a 419 on base percentage. So.
And some of the outs, even yesterday, I mean, he went 1 for 5. He hit the home run, and then he goes 1 for 5. But he was just tattooing the ball. He hit a couple of really hard outs as well.
Yeah,
and that's good. Like, you want to see that. I mean, he's still Nick Castellanos. He's still going to have the swings that frustrate the hell out of you. He's going to chase pitches out of the zone. Like, my God, Nick, what are you doing? But at the same time, when you let him just be him, I think you get more productive at bats.
He had a couple good swings in the 10th inning. I actually thought against Bender late that he was going to win the game for them there. Put him ahead by 2 runs and win the game effectively, assuming that Gregory Soto wasn't going to come in and light it on fire, which
we didn't. But I mean, he took a ball
off
his ass.
Fluky play, ball off his ass. I actually, you know what? Like, here you go. Put this in the reserve for later in the week. We'll see what else happens. But like, I don't blame Gregory Soto for what happened yesterday. It was an intentional walk and then a really weird bounce. And if he plays the ball cleanly, maybe it's a double play and there's a runner on third with 2 outs.
Yeah.
Did you feel particularly confident about Gregory Soto during that game, though? So
No.
I think there's 2 separate conversations to be had there, and I don't know that we need to have it in this moment.
I'll tell you,
oh man,
I'll tell you the thing that bothered me more, and it started earlier, and this is where I was. And when it happened, I'm in my head calculating ahead, right? I'm thinking like a manager, right? And I'm calculating ahead, and I'm saying, if this game goes extra innings, they're in trouble, because I'm really surprised that Spencer Turnbull only threw the 1 inning.
Yeah.
And Rob tried to explain it afterwards, saying if they were still behind, he was going to leave him in the game. But once it got to 6-6, he considered it a high leverage situation and didn't want Turnbull in that spot. And I'm like, well, why? What has the guy done to make you think he can't pitch in that spot? Like to me,
it's funny you say that, because I'm watching it and I'm like, are they really going to use him in this spot? Like, I just think it's so unfair to use a guy in that situation when, like, that's not what he does. Like, I don't know if he can handle that moment. I know that it's the Marlins and it's in the middle of a game where you might be trying to sweep a team, and it's not like it was game 6 of the World Series, so you have to like see, but also like, I don't know. That's what's weird about it. Like, I don't love that they went to him, but then once he was in the damn game and got out of that first inning, like, go back to him.
Right. That's the thing. Right. So
I didn't get that at all.
Well, so here's how I'm looking at it, Bob, because so they tied the game. It's 6-6. And now I'm saying to myself, okay, if this game goes extra innings, you're in trouble, because now you got to use guys. They had to go to Strahm. So now you've basically taken Strahm out of tonight. He can't pitch tonight because he's going back-to-back games already. All right.
And are you going to go back-to-back with Turnbull, a guy that has not done that? Like,
right. So you're basically 2 guys down going into this Mets game when Christopher Sanchez is scheduled to pitch tonight. And he may not give you a lot of, you hope he gives you the same kind of start he gave you in his last
the whole thing, like, hey, piggyback, like, and Christopher Sanchez gives you 4 innings tonight, then you had Spencer Turnbull that maybe he can get you into the 7th. Like,
we're Jose Ruizing it tonight.
Yeah,
Jose Ruiz tonight.
Doing with this guy, like, I really don't. I really don't.
Yeah. So I mean, but I'm looking at it. I'm counting the innings. I'm like, if they get to extra innings, they're done. Like, who's
the only way that they're
Soto and Dominguez.
Spencer Turnbull. And I know it's a consideration and it's a big one, but the only way that any of this makes sense is if they really wanted to block out 2 to 3 weeks of this season to get a significant reduction in his trajectory in terms of innings thrown. It's the only thing that makes sense about how they're handling this, because in terms of getting a good arm, and I talked about this Saturday, a good arm that's really on one right now, who's feeling good and he's been productive as hell, and you're pitching him in these really strange situations, either in meaningless situations, or you're bringing him in when he's stretched out for 1 inning, and then you don't trust him to navigate the Marlins beyond an inning. man, like I don't get that. I really don't. Maybe we're overreacting. And at the end of the year, Spencer Turnbull throws 130 innings. He's back in the rotation. He's nailing down big time outs and big time innings for a team pushing for a division title. And the Phillies will have played it perfectly. And we'll say to one another, remember back on Mother's Day when we were bitching about Spencer Turnbull? Well, the Phillies got it right. And I concede that they might because, listen, they're pretty smart. Dave Dombrowski, pretty smart. That front office, pretty smart. Caleb Cotham, hell of a lot smarter than I am. But in the moment, it's kind of hard to make sense of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I mean, I was perplexed by the whole order of pitchers yesterday. Like when they go to Kirkering, so that's the other thing. I understood getting Kirkering up first because you thought you might have to take Wheeler out in the inning, and you didn't want to put Turnbull in a spot where he has to come in with runners on. But you're talking about coming in as a reliever that you've never done before. Now all of a sudden you're asking him to come in and get an out with, guys on base. Like that's a completely different thing. So I was okay with Kirkering warming up first, but then they pull Wheeler from the game and they go to Kirkering. And now I'm saying, I guess they're not going to go to Turnbull today. They're saving him for the piggyback tomorrow. Then they go to Turnbull, and it's like, I guess he's going to pitch 2 to 3 innings here and finish this out. Now that they, whatever, and he only pitches the 1 inning, and I'm like, none of this makes sense now.
Right.
Now you burn Strahm you can't use him against the Mets, and they went Strahm, Alvarado, and then who came in after Alvarado? Was it just Hoffman?
Well, yesterday, it was Kirkering, Turnbull, Alvarado, Strahm, Hoffman, Soto.
That's right. So Alvarado went before Strahm. Okay, and then Hoffman, and then Soto at the end, and so now, I mean, you're down 2 pitchers going into this game tonight, and a game that Christopher Sanchez is starting. I just didn't think it was good deployment of the bullpen yesterday.
Well, on that note, I'm with you. I'm a little bit worried about the way you have your bullpen aligned coming into this game. The Mets did get a little surge of momentum with the dramatic walk-off homer down 1 in the 9th last night.
Yeah.
Manaea has been pretty good for them. Sanchez has obviously been pretty good for the Phillies as well. I don't know if JT Realmuto is going to play. I don't know if Kyle Schwarber is going to play. And I opened up the old FanDuel app this morning, and I see that the Phillies are a -124 favorite. Phillies haven't lost back-to-back games, by the way, since the Cincinnati series when they were on the road, April 23rd and April 24th. Can I just say, like, for a little dose of negativity, and I hope I'm wrong, I hate the Phillies tonight. Hate them.
That's fair. It's fair. They haven't lost 3 in a row all year, just so we know. Just to point out, they haven't lost 3 in a row all year.
Yeah.
This one is a scary game for me. Like,
I don't like it. I don't like. They don't play that well in New York. They don't play that well at Citi Field. Just, I don't know if you're going to get the JV lineup tonight. And I don't mean that to be, mean, but like you might get the JV lineup tonight. Are we at a point where you absolutely trust Christopher Sanchez to go give you another 7 innings tonight? Like probably not. You're probably going to need that. So I don't know, man. We'll see. We'll see what happens. You got 4 at the Mets this week. I don't even know what the acceptable result is. Like, I know we like to take it series by series, block by block, and say, like, what are you thinking? My guess is that they probably split these 4 games with the Mets. But then again, I said, and you said as well, that they were going to split the 4 games last weekend with the Giants, and then they broomed them. So, like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just maybe I'm underselling what this team is about to do. But I think that you're probably going to see a split here this week. And then you get that really interesting Washington team, man. Like, I asked you about them a week ago, and they go up, and Friday night they're up in Boston. It's a tough place to play. Red Sox are throwing the ball really well. They cannot hit at all, that Red Sox team, though, man. Like, they are not scoring runs right now. But they go up and they win a game to start the series, and then they had 2 pretty close losses over the weekend. Like, Washington is playing a competitive brand of baseball. So, like, when you say, like, hey, look at the Phillies crushing the best record in baseball, and then you look ahead and you're like, well, the Mets kind of suck. And the Nationals are the Nationals. Like, this should be easy. Like, this week, when you want to bitch about the Phillies schedule, I think this week's actually a little bit harder than you might realize.
Yeah, I don't think this is a walkover week. I still think the Phillies are going to come away with more wins than losses over the next 7 games against the Mets and the Nationals. I actually think they're going to win 3 out of 4 against the Mets.
Okay.
I'm not sure which tonight's the one that bothers me the most. But I look at the matchups the rest of the week, and I kind of like the Phillies in the other 3 games. But then again, if you asked me if they were going to lose a game to the Marlins, would it be the Zack Wheeler game? I would have said no shot. It's going to be the Zack Wheeler game.
No.
It turned out to be
Fun
that game, right?
baseball, yeah.
So baseball is just weird that way, right? But yeah, you're right. And I like the Nationals are a team that bothers me a little bit more than the Mets do. I think the Mets stink, frankly.
They can't hit. The
Yeah.
Mets have thrown the ball well, though. I mean, their
Yeah.
pitching staff has done a pretty good job. You subtract Adam Ottavino, who sucks. That guy is a stone cold loser, which means he'll probably have two scoreless appearances against Phillies this week. Book that. But Ottavino's been pretty rough. I mean, he's a little older. He's been around the block and he's had his day, but he has not been great for them lately.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just I'll go with the Phillies pitching over the Mets pitching in this series. I think they win 3 of 4 tonight. Scares me a little bit, but yeah. And then the Nationals, if they take 2 out of 3, so if you go 5-2 in these next 7 games, you're good. You're good with that.
Ricky, what is wrong with this Phillies team? Did they get complacent when they got out to their best start since the 1976 season? Wheeler's imploding. Sanchez only gives you 4. Where is JT Realmuto? I am concerned.
You're missing the blue glasses, Bob.
Yeah.
You see the blue glasses. Oh, that's funny.
I am concerned. Yeah, I don't know, man.
It's good.
God.
It's good. But
all right, well, one last thing.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned the Red Sox. I wanted to kind of talk about them a little bit, and not necessarily because they got, they're having a decent start to a season, but there was an interesting thing, and we've talked about this in the past, just about the game and about pitching in sports. You've mentioned that they're off to a great start. I guess their team ERA is best in baseball at 2.59. Their rotation is best ERA, even better than the Phillies at 2.10 through the first. I think it was through the first 35 games that they played. And they're missing a bunch of pitchers too. Brian Bios is out. Pavetta's been out. Whitlock's been out. Giolito didn't even get the pitch for them. He got hurt in spring training. But they got a bunch of guys that are pitching really well. And the interesting thing there is, and this is a South Jersey guy, Andrew Bailey, is their pitching coach. But he and their I don't know what Craig Breslow's official title is. Is he their president of baseball operations? I don't even know what his title is, but they used to be teammates together in Oakland and are very close and are very friendly. But they have an approach that is kind of
the chief baseball officer.
Chief baseball officer, is that what it is? Okay, I didn't even know what the official title was. But they're doing something, and we've talked about this. They're kind of rolling back the clock a little bit with their pitching. Do you know that they throw the fewest fastballs of any team in Major League Baseball, and by a lot? They are only averaging 31.8% of their pitches are fastballs, and the Major League average is 47%. And I think there's only one other team that's under 40, but 31.8% of their pitches are fastballs. Are we seeing a something here that maybe teams might start to look at and go, hey, we need more pitchers and not throwers to be successful in baseball in 2024 and then going forward? Like, I think that there's everything in sports is cyclical, right? And I think we're starting to see a couple teams. We talk about the Phillies. Why are their starters so successful? 4 of the 5 guys are not power pitchers. And when you look at it, right? Is this something? Are we having a rebirth of the pitcher that is not a power arm?
So Andrew Bailey's pitching staff and Ranger Suarez's National League Cy Young Award-winning season is going to make pitching cool again, the art of pitching cool again, not just big velo.
Yeah.
Maybe. I think actually, I know that you'll ask a question and then I always hijack it and take it somewhere else, but this does tie into a conversation that you and I have previously had, which is I do think that we're reaching a tipping point with the way that pitchers are developed. And you look at all the injuries that we've had to high-profile arms, and we talk about college recruiting, and you go around and let's say I have a high school kid who's been super effective for us. I had a kid back in 2019. He ended up at Rowan. He was actually the NJAC Pitcher of the Year this past season. So he really went on and had a nice college career. It took him a couple of years to really get the big games and all of that. And he did, and he worked his butt off. But for us in high school, he consistently sat 80, 83. And I mean, he could throw 3 different pitches at any time for a strike. And as a high school kid, that's all you need. I mean, you don't need to throw the ball 90 miles an hour, but you're not going to get D1 looks. And I mean, this kid had video game numbers. He won every start he had. I think his ERA was like sub 1.4. Strikeout to walk ratio was probably 8-1. I mean, he didn't walk anybody. And Rowan is a great program and has a lot of success here on a local level. And when you look at D3 schools, like they stack up pretty favorably. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. Like, don't misconstrue what I'm saying, but like this kid had a historic season for us, and he was not recruited by Division I schools. Whereas Division I schools lock in on showcase. This kid's up to 88. He flashes 90. He's got plus this, you know. You got kids that are going to these labs in December and January, figuring out how to get 4 or 5 extra miles per hour on their fastball, weighted ball drills. And I'm not sitting here dismissing the usefulness of that. I'm not saying that this is evil to do this, but we are reaching a point where it's velo, 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 and the game from top down has become obsessed with velocity. And I think in doing that, there has been a little bit of a blind eye to the nuance of pitching. And like, listen, like it requires nuance mechanically and biomechanically to maximize velocity. So these things aren't like mutually exclusive. Like there's a lot of data and precision and development and practice that goes into maximizing velocity, but really just thinking through it and commanding several pitches, like that stuff has definitely taken a back seat. And I just wonder with the injuries and where things are going with kids' arms. And then you see this, what you're bringing up, and it just kind of makes me wonder about where does pitching go long term? Like, is it just going to be this race to the top and velo, and that's all there is to it? I feel like in time there has to be some type of course correction, and maybe when you start to see results at the major league level, there's a funnel down effect to that.
I think that's a very well put analysis of this, Bob. I mean, I really do. I think that
sometimes I'll give you something a little insightful.
No, but seriously, I think that you're spot on. I think that
what's wrong with Brandon Marsh? Yeah, on the next cross stop.
No, I think you're right in that it has to start at the level. It can't just be at the major league level, right? It has to start for much earlier than that, and that's not going to change until there is success at the major league level. And say, oh, we don't have to go throw 99 to make it to the majors. We can actually do something different and make it to the major leagues. Oh, okay, let's try that then instead. We're not going to see something that's now, we talk about copycats in sports, and something happens, and then the very next year everybody else tries to do it. A team wins a certain way in football, and then we're going to try copy that offense, we're going to copy that defense, and then they do it the very next year. I don't think it's something that you're going to see happen overnight. But I do think that if there is sustained success by teams like the Red Sox, like the Phillies, with pitchers who are not flamethrowers, maybe 5 years down the road, 6 years down the road, you start to see a change in baseball, because the younger kids coming up are going to start to do it that way as well, as opposed to I have to reach that 98, 99 threshold to be able to be Paul Skeens, for example, who threw 17 pitches over 100 miles per hour in his first major league start. Like, you don't necessarily have to.
That is where we're at. I'm talking, I'm like projecting about like maybe the game, the industry, the whole sport sort of starts to rethink things. But then you see Paul Skeens go out there and he's throwing 102, and he's got Libby Dunn out in the stands, and it's a circus, and like kids fall in love with that stuff, man. They're like, all right, like, dude, this kid, look at the hype around him. And he was not great in game one. I thought he showed some flashes of why he is what he is and how he's built, but like, that's where the hype is. Like, that's what's in right now. I think the sport is ultimately going to have to consider, like, does an adaptation, does this evolve maybe in the way that it hasn't over the last 10 years? Like, could you imagine, like, we always talk about Jamie Moyer because we had him here, but like, just think about so many different guys, and you wonder, like, would they have even gotten a sniff guys who probably could compete today, because you know that like generation to generation, it doesn't always translate. Like you can sit here and say, well, you've got to throw 99 because look at how strong these guys are. Look at the science of hitting and how it's evolved over time. You know, these guys, you got to fight fire with fire. It's literally power versus power, explosiveness versus explosiveness. So like that's what plays. But you know, you wonder, like the days of turning on the Phillies and watching, you know, Terry Mulholland take on Tom Candiotti, like that's a name I just pulled out of my rear end. But like those days are over, dude. Like, but do you get back there? I don't know, maybe.
I don't know if it goes back that far. I mean, I do think that there's still going to be.
Yeah, I'm not saying you come in and be successful throwing 86 and
yeah, no,
there's a reasonable threshold here.
Yeah, hard throwing pitchers are still going to be valuable. There's no question about it. But I mean, I look at even just like a game last week when the Phillies played Toronto and they couldn't touch Chris Bassett. Well, what was it about Chris Bassett? He was throwing 6 different pitches. The curveball was barely breaking the speed limit, and you know, like that kept them off balance. And, you know, Topper talked about it afterwards. He's like, yeah, man, his pitches were really keeping us off balance. Schwarber said the same thing. He pitched a great game. Like we were off balance. Well, yeah, of course you were off balance because you're used to swinging at 99 and this guy's throwing 70. Yes, you're off balance, right? I mean, so I think teams are starting to recognize that while the velocity thing is important, that there may in fact be value in guys who can pitch a different way. Yeah. And having a mixture of the two is probably the best way for a team to move forward. And I think that the Red Sox are, you know, living proof this season, and I think the Phillies are living proof this season, and I think that you may start to see some teams diversify their pitching staffs a little bit over the course of time here and going forward. That was just my thought on it.
All right, good stuff. Well, listen, for Anthony Sanfilippo, I'm Bob Wankel. We'll be back later this week. Make sure that you're following Anthony and myself on X. Follow Anthony at AnSanPhilly. You follow me at Bob_Wankel. Check out RedOctoberPhilly.com. Newsletter comes out hopefully Monday and Friday. That's always the goal. Some professional things have sort of gotten in the way of that scheduling here recently, but I'll have a newsletter going out later today. Make sure that you check that out, and we will talk to you soon.